Mabuhay, I'm Raymund Villanueva from the Philippines. I've been a broadcaster since 1994, so that's about 30 years already this year. And for the last 20 years, I've been helping marginalized communities and sectors put up their community radio stations or produce radio programs. According to UNESCO, the Philippines is where the community radio movement started in the region. We credit this to the late Louie Tabing, who established the Tambuli network in 1992. He was able to establish 25 radio stations across the Philippines. And that's where we got this inspiration to carry on his work and put up more community radio stations in the Philippines. Unfortunately, it hasn't improved since then. Of the 25 community radio stations that were built by Louie Tabing, only one remains to be genuinely community radio station. What the government allowed and this huge corporate media entity was to appropriate for itself, for profit, the frequencies that should have been given to marginalized communities and sectors. This company started operating in 1995 as the Radyo Natin network, and it has more than 100 radio stations. But these are all under its franchise, which is corporate. So we are denied the opportunity to utilize those frequencies that should have been given to poor communities instead of this big corporation. The ownership structure is very unjust in the sense that about 95% of all radio stations in the Philippines, I'm not talking about community radio stations at this point, the radio industry in the Philippines is largely, a huge majority, corporate owned and operated. There are only two genuine community radio stations as defined by UNESCO and AMARC itself, that it should be non-profit, that it should be that there should be community participation. Only two. One of the reasons for this was that of the community radio stations that we've built or are trying to build have received all sorts of harassments from the government. Whenever communities try to talk about what's beneficial for them, the Philippine military and the Philippine government say it's subversive, and that's why our history in the recent in the past 20 years is political persecution, even arrests and assassination. And that's the problem in the Philippines. They don't want, at least they don't want to allow greater community participation in the airwaves. They want to control radio broadcasting and put it entirely in the hands of corporations and government. It's quite difficult because if you're a poor community or a poor sector, community women, farmers, workers, urban poor, who want to set up community radio stations, we are made to undergo the same process as the corporate media. We have to seek franchise from Congress, and that's very difficult because it's a political process. And then we have to acquire the agreement of other existing community radio stations who are mostly corporate in the area. And then we have to acquire about 10 other licenses. We have to spend millions of pesos just to have a franchise of our own. And that marginalizes communities, poor communities in the Philippines, because they make it very difficult for us to register and operate as a legal entity. Years. If you don't have connections among the politicians, then it gets even more difficult. And they don't usually give assistance or sponsorship if you're not politically connected in the traditional politics, in the sense of traditional politics. If you're poor, you are in the margins anyway. So if it's not beneficial to either traditional politicians or the government, then pretty much they make it very difficult or even impossible. So that's where we come in, Coda Productions. No? We try to assist them, but it's not always that we succeed. And when we succeed, we still have to contend with all sorts of harassments from the government, from the military. Whenever you talk about social justice in the Philippines, they immediately view you with suspicion as if you're subversive already. Until very recently, the youngest journalist and broadcaster in jail in the world is one that I personally trained. She's a station manager in training, and therefore part of our network, and by extension, a member of AMARC, Asia Pacific. At the start of the pandemic lockdowns, the house she was staying in, along with another human rights defender, was raided by the police, and she was charged with illegal possession of firearms and explosives, as if the government is trying to say, this very young community broadcaster is sleeping with guns and grenades under her pillow. She's still in jail. Her name is Frenchie May Cumpio, and she's become an internationally known case of press freedom violation. Another, her what do you call this, counterpart in a nearby island in the Philippines, Elena Tihamo, was abducted from her home a few months later, a few months after the arrest of Frenchie May Cumpio. Elena Tihamo was station manager in training of Radyo Sugboanon. And then a year later, she turned up dead in a hospital in Metro Manila when no one could travel freely because of the pandemic lockdowns. That makes us conclude that her abductors and killers were government agents. To this day, there have been no substantial investigation into her abduction and death. And the government is ignoring the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Expression, Irene Khan, who keeps on asking the government what's the status of both Frenchie and Elena's cases. These are community radio broadcasters that we have convinced to try community radio broadcasting as an extension of their service to society in general. It pains us deeply that they are paying for their lives just to be able to exercise their freedom of expression and help the people enjoy their freedom to information. We have conducted lots of media safety trainings. Remember that in November 23, 2009, the worst attack on journalists, including broadcasters, happened in the Philippines, where 32 journalists were killed in just one incident. Since then, we've never stopped conducting media safety trainings. And now, as a result of this systematic drive to convince our colleagues to exercise and be aware of safety, there have been many instances that I've witnessed how this worked, but that did not stop media killings in the Philippines. In fact, under the current Philippine government, 4 have been killed since July 2022. So instead of having this stopped, just goes on regardless of whoever is the president. So from 2009, 32 in just one incident. And if we count back from as far back as 1986, there have been about 2,000 victims of media killings, a very small percentage of which is being solved, meaning masterminds and perpetrators are behind bars. In fact, those we believe who masterminded the killings of journalists and broadcasters can still run for office and get elected, which makes it very difficult for us to exact justice from them. They are in power, they are still powerful. How can journalists go against that systemic impunity? So it's still it's an ongoing process. We do our part by conducting trainings, but if state policies and a situation of impunity exists, there would always be victims. Be aware of safety procedures and protocols. We have developed, at least in the Philippines, set of protocols, even a set of guidelines before covering a tense situation, during coverage, and even after. That's one. Each journalist in the Philippines must be armed with this mindset of safety. That's one. Two, we must demand from the government the elimination of a culture of impunity. The government, as the duty bearers of rights and freedoms of the people should be responsible in ensuring that press freedom, for example, is exercised without hindrance and without threats. Problem is the government that actually encourages this culture of impunity. In fact, the government is at the forefront of violating press freedom. So we must demand from the government to do its duty in ensuring the rights and freedoms. That's number 2. Number 3, the people must recognize, must be informed that any attack on journalists and broadcasters is an attack on their freedom to information. Without journalism and broadcasting, the right to information, the right to freedom of expression and press freedom gets curtailed. If these 3 rights are curtailed, the discussion on other universal rights and freedoms also get curtailed. Without journalists telling them it's their right to have quality and accessible education or health care or subsidized housing, they won't know. So journalists must, as part of our duty of informing the people, must also inform them that the rights that we fight for, such as press freedom, is also the right. So that's number 3. So to sum it up, number 1, safety, the mindset of being safe. Secondly, demand from the government to uphold the people's rights. And 3, inform the people of these rights in order for them to become partners in safeguarding these rights.